Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive today
Yeah.
into the ongoing crisis in Myanmar.
It's a,
Yeah, really tough situation.
absolutely.
We're going to be focusing on the struggles of the internally displaced people there.
Yeah.
The junta's dependence on conscripts who just aren't properly trained,
Right.
and then also the really harrowing experiences of political prisoners in Myanmar.
Yeah, those are really all critical areas to focus on.
For sure. And this information is especially vital for any of our listeners out there working in international organizations, embassies, or government agencies who are trying to support the Burmese community.
Yeah, anyone who's working to support the Burmese community really needs to understand the nuances of this situation.
Exactly. And our main source for this deep dive is the Mizima Weekly,
Okay.
specifically issue 33 from November 21st, 2024.
Gotcha.
Mizima is an independent news organization
Right.
that has been so bravely reporting from inside Myanmar,
Mm.
even with all of the pressure that they're facing.
Yes.
So their work is really a window into a reality that I think a lot of people just don't see.
I agree.
So today, we're going to shed some light on some of their key findings.
Awesome. I'm ready.
Okay. So let's start with the IDPs,
Okay.
the internally displaced persons.
Right.
The sheer number is just staggering.
It is.
Over 3 million people have been internally displaced,
Wow.
and over 1.7 million of them are in the Northwest region alone.
It's like half of the country's displaced population is concentrated in one area.
Right. It's a huge strain on resources.
For sure. And I can only imagine what that does to people's sense of stability, just the constant fear of having to move again.
Yeah, it's not just a one-time displacement either. It's this
Yeah.
constant cycle of fleeing to what they think is going to be a safe haven and then having to move again.
Exactly. They might go to a village or a monastery or even just like a farmhouse thinking that they'll be safe there.
Right.
But then the junta raids force them to flee again.
Yeah.
It's just relentless.
It really is. And then the conditions that they face are just dire.
They are.
We're talking extreme weather,
Mhm.
scarce shelter, and chronic shortages of everything.
Yeah.
Food blankets, warm clothing, even basic medical care.
It's a humanitarian crisis.
It really is.
And the junta is making things so much worse by restricting aid to resistance-controlled areas.
It's like they're deliberately trying to make things as difficult as possible for these people.
It really seems that way.
So aid organizations are struggling to even reach the people who need help the most.
Exactly.
And that just makes an already desperate situation even more critical.
Absolutely.
Mizima actually highlighted a really good example of this.
Okay.
Mizoram State in India
Mm-hmm.
is providing rice aid to Myanmar refugees.
Which is fantastic.
It is.
Right.
But getting that aid to the remote areas is a huge challenge.
Especially in a conflict zone.
Exactly.
It really highlights the need for collaboration and strong partnerships to deliver aid effectively.
Yes, definitely. So let's shift gears now to the junta's conscription practices.
Okay.
It's a pretty grim picture.
It is.
They reinstated the conscription law,
Right.
and they are aggressively trying to fill their ranks.
Yeah. They've conscripted over 20,000 people since February of this year alone.
That's a crazy number.
It is. And it's really alarming because these conscripts are often given very little training before they're sent into active combat zones.
Right? Sometimes only 45 days.
Yeah. It's basically sending them out there completely unprepared.
It's essentially a death sentence for a lot of them.
And the whole system is riddled with corruption, too.
Yeah, Mizima reports that wealthy families can essentially just buy their way out.
They can pay for replacements or bribe officials.
It's so unfair.
It is. And so the poorest and most vulnerable end up bearing the brunt of this conflict.
Right. It's the people who have the fewest choices who are forced into this situation.
And what's even more disturbing is how the junta is exploiting the Rohingya people.
Yes. This is where things get really, really troubling.
Absolutely.
They're being forced into military service,
Right.
and they're often used as frontline shields.
Because of their lack of training.
Exactly. And the casualty rates are horrific.
It's a blatant disregard for human life.
It is. And it's a stark example of how conflict can target and magnify existing inequalities.
Absolutely. And it raises serious ethical questions about the junta's tactics.
So this should be a major focus for international organizations who are working to address human rights violations.
I agree.
Okay, so let's move on now to the plight of political prisoners.
Okay.
Mizima gave us a pretty chilling glimpse inside Tharir Wadi prison.
Yeah.
And what really struck me was the treatment of the female political prisoners there.
Yeah, about 15 women have been held in solitary confinement for almost 2 years.
And they're enduring horrific conditions.
They're exposed to poisonous animals, denied basic necessities, and just left to languish.
It's like they're trying to break them.
It really seems that way,
And it's not just the women.
right?
There are reports of male political prisoners being extorted, beaten, shackled, forced into labor.
It's awful.
Mizima even reported that new inmates are extorted with these form fees.
Essentially bribes.
Yeah. And those who can't pay face even more brutal treatment.
It's a system designed to punish and exploit.
It really is.
Yeah.
And then Mizima uncovered another layer of cruelty on top of that.
Oh, no.
Torture by fellow inmates.
You're kidding.
Yeah. And it's allegedly orchestrated by the prison warden himself.
So it's not just random acts of violence, it's systematic.
It is. And it creates an atmosphere of fear and violence where basic human rights are completely disregarded.
It's just horrifying.
And it's a stark reminder that the junta's cruelty extends far beyond the battlefield. It reaches deep into the institutions that are supposed to uphold the law.
You're right.
And it's not just a few isolated cases.
Right.
The data from the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners is really sobering. Over 27,000 people have been arrested since the coup,
Wow.
and over 21,000 are still in custody.
So it's not just individual cases, it's a sweeping crackdown on dissent.
Exactly.
And it's important for our listeners to understand the scale and methods of this crackdown.
Yeah, absolutely. Because understanding that is crucial for developing strategies to help.
For sure.
So it's not just about political prisoners and those caught in the crossfire of conflict.
Right.
We also need to consider the broader impact of this crisis.
Especially on women and girls.
Yeah, we have a UN Women report here that paints a really alarming picture.
Okay, what does it say?
It reveals that women and girls are disproportionately affected by the conflicts and floods that are ravaging the country.
Oh, that's just heartbreaking.
It is. They're losing their livelihoods,
Yeah,
especially those in agriculture and small-scale businesses.
because the floods are destroying their crops and infrastructure.
Exactly. And displacement and overcrowded shelters are leading to an increase in gender-based violence.
That's awful.
And there's a lack of clean water and sanitation,
Right.
which poses severe health risks.
Especially for pregnant women and girls.
Yes. And the underfunding of the Humanitarian Needs Plan is making all of these problems even worse.
So women and girls are being left incredibly vulnerable.
They are. And this report really underscores the need for targeted interventions that address their unique needs.
Absolutely. The international community needs to step up and prioritize their safety and well-being.
Okay, so now let's talk about independent journalism in Myanmar.
Okay.
Mizima Weekly itself is a prime example of the challenges and dangers that journalists are facing in the country.
Absolutely.
Since the coup, 7 journalists have been killed,
Wow.
and 60 journalists and 3 media workers are still detained.
Just for doing their jobs.
Right. Just for trying to report the truth.
It's a dangerous and thankless job in Myanmar right now.
It is. But Mizima is a beacon of truth and accountability amidst this crackdown. And the recent release of former journalist Kayas Hortin offers a glimmer of hope.
Yeah, it does.
But it's also a chilling reminder of the price that journalists are paying for their commitment to truth-telling.
Right.
And sadly, Mizima is facing immense financial pressure.
Yeah, a lot of independent media outlets in Myanmar are struggling right now.
They are. And their vital work is under threat.
So what can we do to help?
Well, this is where our listeners can make a real difference.
Okay, I'm listening.
Subscribing to Mizima Weekly, sharing their articles, and supporting them financially can help ensure their survival.
Yeah, they need our help now more than ever.
They do. So every subscription, every donation, every share helps sustain their critical work.
Okay, I'm going to subscribe right now.
Awesome. So let's take a step back for a moment and connect all of these threads.
Okay.
We've uncovered this web of widespread displacement exploitation by the junta and a brutal crackdown on political prisoners and journalists.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But it's vital to see how all of these issues are interconnected.
Yeah, they're not just separate incidents. It's a system designed to suppress dissent and maintain control.
Exactly. And that's what makes understanding the nuances of this crisis so important.
Especially for those working to support the Burmese community.
Right. So seeing the big picture helps us find the most effective points of intervention.
That makes sense.
So given all of this interconnectedness, where do we go from here?
That's the big question.
It is. What can our listeners do to make a tangible difference?
Especially those working in international organizations, embassies, and government agencies.
Exactly. What can they do?
Well, there are several key areas where focused efforts can have a significant impact.
Okay, I'm all ears.
First and foremost, we need to ensure that humanitarian aid reaches those who need it most,
Right.
especially the displaced populations and those in conflict zones.
Okay.
This means putting pressure on the junta to lift restrictions on aid access
Right.
and working with local organizations that have established networks on the ground.
So bypassing the junta's roadblocks and leveraging existing community networks.
Exactly. That's key for effective aid delivery.
But what about addressing the more systemic issues?
Like the exploitation of vulnerable populations.
Right. Especially the Rohingya.
That's absolutely critical.
Okay, how do we do that?
We need to advocate for their protection,
Okay.
call out the human rights abuses, and work towards holding those responsible accountable.
So the international community needs to send a clear message that these practices are unacceptable.
Exactly. They won't be tolerated.
And we can't forget about the political prisoners.
No, we can't.
We need to push for their release,
Yes,
demand better conditions within the prisons,
right.
and support organizations that are documenting the violations taking place. It's about shining a light on the darkness.
And making sure that those who are suffering aren't forgotten.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And as we've discussed, supporting independent journalism like Mizma Weekly is essential.
absolutely.
They are providing the world with vital information about what's happening in Myanmar.
And they need our support to continue their work.
So subscribing, donating, spreading the word about their reporting are all tangible ways to help.
I agree. And finally, we need to maintain pressure on the junta to engage in meaningful dialogue
Okay.
and work towards a peaceful resolution to this crisis.
So that includes supporting initiatives that promote national reconciliation and democratic reforms.
Yes, it's a long and arduous road ahead, but we cannot abandon hope. The people of Myanmar deserve our unwavering support
Yes.
as they fight for a future where their rights are respected and their voices are heard.
Well said.
Oh.
And speaking of hope, there was a story in Mizma Weekly that I found incredibly powerful.
Which one?
It's about Lartar,
Okay.
the daughter of a Karen National Union commander.
Right.
She grew up surrounded by conflict.
That's so sad.
It is. And she talks about having to flee her home at the age of 3,
Yeah.
learning to use weapons as a child, and witnessing the brutality of the military firsthand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And what I found so powerful about her story
Yeah.
is that despite all the hardships that she endured, she never lost her spirit or her determination.
That's amazing.
It is. She chose to pursue education even in the most challenging circumstances and remains committed to fighting for a better future for her people.
She's an inspiration.
She is. And there's a line in the article where she jokes that with a single knife, she could survive in the jungle.
Wow.
I know. It struck me as such a powerful testament to her resilience and resourcefulness.
It really is.
Her story, and countless others like it, remind us that the people of Myanmar are not just victims, they are survivors, fighters, and agents of change.
So well said.
It's a testament to the incredible strength of the human spirit
Absolutely.
and the ability to persevere even in the face of unimaginable adversity.
I think that's a really important point to remember.
It is. However, there are also concerning developments that we need to be aware of,
Oh, like what?
especially regarding the junta's attempts to legitimize their rule through economic partnerships.
Okay. I'm interested to hear more about this.
So Mizma Weekly reports that the junta is forming a working committee to establish a joint venture security company with China.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's concerning
It is.
because it suggests that the junta is seeking to further entrench its power by strengthening ties with China.
Right. And China has been hesitant to condemn the coup.
Exactly.
Oh.
And the committee's mandate includes figuring out the logistics of importing weapons.
Oh, that's not good.
No, it's not. And ensuring that these actions don't infringe upon Myanmar's sovereignty.
Which is kind of ironic considering how the junta has been treating its own people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But given the junta's track record, there's a real risk that this partnership could fuel the conflict and lead to even more repression.
Absolutely.
So this situation definitely warrants close attention from the international community.
I agree. The potential implications are significant.
They are. It could provide the junta with greater access to resources and technology.
And embolden them to escalate their crackdown on dissent.
It also raises questions about China's role in all of this.
It does.
They're trying to balance their economic interests with the potential for instability in the region.
It's a complex situation for them.
It is. But one thing is clear. We cannot allow economic partnerships to become a shield for the junta's abuses.
Agreed. The international community needs to make it very clear that any engagement with the junta has to be contingent on tangible progress towards a peaceful and democratic solution.
Okay, so to recap, we've uncovered a web of widespread displacement, exploitation by the junta, and a brutal crackdown on political prisoners and journalists.
It's a lot.
It is. It's a complex and multifaceted crisis. But it's vital to see how all of these issues are interconnected.
Absolutely. It's a system of oppression.
Yes. And understanding that system is crucial for anyone who's working to support the Burmese community.
I couldn't agree more.
So we've laid the groundwork here today.
We have.
We've talked about the crisis in detail,
Mm-hmm.
and we've highlighted some of the key areas where action is needed.
Right.
So in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore some potential solutions.
Okay. I'm looking forward to that.
Me too. And we'll discuss how we can all contribute to creating a brighter future for Myanmar.
Sounds good.
So stay tuned.
I will. Yeah. It can definitely feel overwhelming sometimes.
It can.
But it's important to remember that even small actions can make a difference.
Right. Like what?
Well, if you're involved in international organizations or government agencies,
Yeah.
using your influence to advocate for policy changes that support the Burmese community is huge.
So things like pushing for targeted sanctions against the junta,
Right.
increasing humanitarian aid, demanding the release of political prisoners.
Exactly. Using those levers of power to create real change on the ground.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about those of us who aren't in those positions of influence?
Mm-hmm.
What can we do?
You can still do a lot.
Like what?
Donating to reputable organizations working in Myanmar,
Okay.
particularly those focused on human rights, humanitarian relief, and supporting independent media.
So donations are key.
Yeah,
What about raising awareness?
that's also incredibly important.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of people just aren't aware of how bad things are.
You're right.
So how can we raise awareness?
Spread the word.
Okay.
Share articles from reliable sources like Mizima.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to your friends and family.
All right.
Use social media to amplify the voices of the Burmese people.
So just starting conversations can make a difference.
Exactly.
And that kind of circles back to something we talked about earlier, the importance of supporting independent journalism.
Yeah.
Mizima and other independent media outlets are risking their lives to report the truth,
They are.
and they really need our support.
I agree.
So subscribing to Mizima Weekly, donating, sharing their articles.
Those are all great ways to help.
Okay, so I think our listeners are getting a good sense of what needs to be done.
Hopefully.
But I want to zoom out for a moment
Okay.
and talk about the long-term implications of this crisis.
So, what does the future hold for Myanmar?
Exactly. If things continue down this path,
That's a really tough question.
it is.
I mean, if the junta remains in power and continues its oppressive tactics,
Yeah.
we could see a deepening of the humanitarian crisis, further economic decline, and increased instability in the region.
That sounds pretty bleak.
It does.
Is there any hope for a brighter future?
There's always hope.
Okay.
The people of Myanmar are incredibly resilient,
Right.
and they haven't given up on their fight for democracy and justice.
They're still resisting?
In many ways, yeah.
Like peaceful protests, armed resistance.
Exactly.
That reminds me of a quote from Lartar.
The KNU commander's daughter.
Yes.
What did she say?
She said, "We may be living in darkness now, but we will never stop fighting for the light."
Oh, wow. That's powerful.
It is. And it really speaks to the unwavering spirit of the Burmese people.
Yeah, it does.
And I think that spirit, combined with continued international pressure and support, could actually pave the way for a more democratic and peaceful future.
I hope so.
Me too. But I also want to acknowledge that there's a geopolitical dimension to all of this as well,
Right.
especially with China's involvement.
That definitely complicates things.
It does. So how does that factor into the long-term outlook?
Well, China has economic and strategic interests in Myanmar, and they've been hesitant to condemn the coup outright.
Which could potentially prolong the junta's grip on power.
Yeah,
So it's a delicate balancing act for the international community.
for sure.
We need to find ways to pressure the junta while also navigating the complexities of China's involvement.
Right.
It's not going to be easy.
It's going to be really challenging.
It is.
But I think the key is to prioritize the well-being of the Burmese people
Okay.
while also recognizing the geopolitical realities.
Because it's a nuanced approach.
It is. It's a tough situation, but it demands our attention and action.
Well, we've covered a lot in this deep dive.
We have.
From the immediate needs of the Burmese people
Yeah.
to the longer-term implications of this crisis.
It's a complex issue.
It is. And it's clear that there are no easy solutions.
There aren't.
But I think the most important thing is that we don't turn away.
We have to stay engaged.
We do. We need to keep the conversation going, keep shining a light on the situation, and keep working towards a better future for Myanmar.
I completely agree.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed,
It is.
but even small actions can make a difference.
They can.
Donating to a reputable organization,
Mm-hmm.
advocating for policy change,
Yeah.
even just spreading awareness.
It all adds up.
It does. And remember, knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
The more informed we are, the better equipped we are to act effectively.
I couldn't agree more.
And that's why resources like Mizimo Weekly are so vital.
They are.
They provide us with the information we need to understand the complexities of this crisis.
And to make informed decisions.
Exactly. So supporting independent journalism is really an investment in a more informed and just world.
Well said.
Well, this has been a really insightful conversation.
It has.
I'm feeling a mix of sadness and hope,
Yeah, I get that.
but mostly a sense of urgency to do something.
To help.
Yeah, anything to help.
I think that's the right place to be.
You do.
That sense of urgency drives action.
So let's channel that urgency into meaningful action.
Okay.
Let's do our part to support the Burmese people and their fight for a brighter future.
Absolutely. Together we can make a difference.
We can. As we wrap up this deep dive, I keep thinking about individual stories
Mm-hmm.
versus the larger narrative.
It's important to remember those.
You know, we've talked about all these statistics
Right.
and policies,
Yeah.
but behind all of those numbers
Mm-hmm.
are real people
Absolutely.
with their own experiences,
Those are the stories that really make this crisis impossible to ignore.
for sure. Like we talked about Lartar,
Yeah, the KNU commander's daughter.
right? Growing up in a conflict zone, learning to use weapons as a child.
Just unimaginable.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder about the long-term impact of experiences like that.
The psychological impact.
Yeah.
It must take incredible resilience to not just survive, but to thrive after something like that.
It's amazing. And you know, her story, while unique in its details,
Mm-hmm.
it really echoes a common theme that we see in conflict zones.
Right.
Children having to grow up way too fast.
Yeah, their innocence is stolen
Exactly.
and their future is so uncertain.
But even in those situations,
Yeah,
we see such incredible displays of courage,
absolutely.
resourcefulness, and determination.
It's inspiring.
It is. It's that flicker of hope that keeps me going.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
The idea that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can still shine through.
It's powerful. And it's not just about individual strength either.
What else is it about?
Community resilience,
Right.
time and time again.
Yeah.
We see communities coming together to support each other,
Mhm.
to share resources, to offer comfort and hope.
And that sense of community seems especially strong in Myanmar.
It is.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's rooted in their culture,
Okay.
their history,
Yeah,
their shared experience of oppression.
that makes sense.
And I think it's also a powerful force for change.
I agree. So I'm curious.
Yeah.
What are some of the long-term psychological and social impacts of this crisis?
That's a good question.
We've talked about the immediate needs,
Right.
but what about the scars that remain long after the headlines fade?
I mean, this crisis is going to leave deep wounds
Yeah.
on individuals,
Mhm.
families, and entire communities.
So what kinds of wounds are we talking about?
Widespread trauma. Okay.
Displacement,
Right.
a loss of trust in institutions,
It's going to take a long time to heal from that.
years, if not generations.
And the rebuilding process.
Yeah.
It can't just focus on physical infrastructure.
Right.
It has to address the psychological and emotional needs of the people.
Absolutely. We need to invest in mental health services,
Okay.
trauma counseling,
Hmm.
and community-based initiatives that promote healing and reconciliation.
So you're saying we need to focus on the whole person,
Exactly.
not just the physical rebuilding.
Right.
And this makes me think about the role of education in all of this.
Oh, for sure.
You know, if we want to build a better future for Myanmar,
Yeah.
we need to empower the next generation
Absolutely.
with knowledge, skills, and hope.
Education is key.
How so?
It's about more than just academic knowledge.
Okay.
It's about fostering critical thinking,
Right.
problem solving,
Right.
and a sense of agency.
That's important. It is. It's about empowering young people to become active participants in shaping their future.
So in a way, supporting education in Myanmar is like an act of resistance.
I like that.
It's an investment in a brighter future.
Exactly. And it's a way to counter the junta's attempts to control the narrative.
To limit access to information.
Right.
So we're giving them the tools to challenge those oppressive systems.
Yes. And to build a more just and equitable society.
That's a powerful thought.
It is.
And it brings us back to the importance of supporting independent media.
like Missima.
Yes, they're providing access to information, fostering critical thinking,
Right.
empowering people to make informed decisions.
They're a vital part of the solution.
So as we end this deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to leave our listeners with this thought.
Okay.
The crisis in Myanmar is complex
It is,
and multifaceted,
for sure.
but it's not insurmountable.
Right.
There is hope,
There is.
there's resilience,
Absolutely.
and there is a path toward a better future.
We just have to find it.
And that path
Yeah.
is paved with informed action,
Okay.
compassionate support, and a commitment to standing with the Burmese people.
In their fight for peace, justice, and democracy.
It's been an incredible journey exploring this topic with you.
It has.
I've learned so much,
Me too.
and I feel a renewed sense of purpose
That's great.
to contribute to the solution.
I think that's the best takeaway from all of this.
It is. So, to our listeners,
Yeah.
thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you leave with a deeper understanding of the crisis and a renewed sense of hope and commitment to action.
Until next time,
Stay curious,
stay informed
stay engaged.
and keep fighting the good fight.
We'll see you soon.
Take care.